Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's September 5th, 2017, 5 o'clock, and I will call the St. Croix Board of Supervisors to order. And at this time, we will stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now if everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll have roll call now. Missing two this evening, and we have one is called in. I'm not sure on Scotty what's happened there, so we will move forward. We have public comment, and I have a couple of slips here. Tracy Carlson from the Village of Baldwin. She'd like to step up.
Yeah, I'm just going to defer to our Village Board President, Willie Zettenbergen. I'm Tracy Carlson, the Village Administrator for Treasurer for the Village of Baldwin. He's asked to be here. Wasn't sure if Willie was going to be able to be here, but he is, so I'll defer to him to speak.
Okay.
Good evening. We have a couple of agenda items that pertain to our community. Tonight, the location of relocating the county shop to the village. Industrial Park. As a community, we are very excited in this opportunity to share this with you. As a board, we're very excited. And we're hoping for your approval tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next person, Darla Myers, speak on the handbook policies.
Darla Myers, 1098 Golden Oaks Lane in Hudson. I wanted to read a couple lines from the Wisconsin County Officials Handbook beginning on page 9. It says some of the basic county board functions are as follows: involve, represent, and be accountable to the public, being responsive to the needs of their constituency through effective communication, are dedicated to the democratic ideals of honesty, openness, and accountability in all matters involving county government, understand the importance of distinguishing between personal opinions and county board positions when communicating with the public and the media, exert a good faith effort to communicate the full truth about county matters, and avoid structuring information to achieve a personal advantage, are good listeners and will speak to issues but also recognize when discussion must conclude and a decision must be made, are committed to building community partnerships, perform the duties of their office with fairness and impartiality to build public confidence in government, and strive to seek and consider citizen input. I am requesting that the St. Croix County Board implement a policy that prohibits the blocking of constituents' emails. An elected official should be open to all views on issues brought forward, not just their own. A constituent should have easy access to an elected official provided by law, and with regard to transparency, information exchange, and dialogue. A constituent should not have to resort to a registered or certified mail expense to ensure their voice is heard or to file an open records request. Based on an open records request, Scott Cox sent a response that stated in part, as I indicated, the county's Outlook email system cannot be configured so as to prevent the blocking of an email. It can only be done on a user-by-user basis. As for the legality of blocking email, I am not aware of any law that prevents a public employee or official from blocking an email. However, I appreciate your concern that it impacts a constituent's ability to communicate to a public official and make open records requests under the law. This may be something that the county can consider in the future. Based on this information, please consider implementing a policy that prohibits St. Croix County Board of Supervisors from blocking constituents' emails. As the Wisconsin County Officials Handbook says, the St. Croix County Board should be responsive to the needs of their constituency through effective communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This time, we're still open for public comment. Is anybody from the public that would like to talk to anything on or off the agenda? We're still open for public comment. And we're still open for public comment. I don't see any, so we will close the public comment section. We know the consent agenda. We need a motion to approve. Supervisor Babbitt, second. Supervisor Brinkman, thank you. Is there any discussion? Any questions? If not, we will vote on that this time. That passes all yeses. Thank you. I don't believe we have any presentations or recognitions this evening. No appointments. We'll move into the annual department reports. We'll start out with Judiciary Circuit Courts, judges, and they have, so.
First of all, Judge Needham had another commitment tonight, couldn't make it. Judge Lindell was still in court. I'm Judge Black, Judge Waterman is on my right, Court Commissioner Dunlap on my left. Unless you have questions, we're not going to take up a lot of your time. For myself, all I want to mention is that Judge Waterman's taken over the drug court last year. I'm now involved in the domestic violence initiative. We have a strategic planning meeting on October 11th in the morning. Very excited about this. Any questions, please come upstairs.
Thank you. And the one thing I would like to add, it's not in our written report, but all 4 judges are very much encouraged by one of your agenda items tonight, and that involves the data analyst position. We find that in our jobs, the more information that we have, the better we can do it. And that goes, especially when it calls, when we're talking about having hard data, factual information. And if we had a data analyst to analyze numbers and tell us what's actually happening rather than relying on anecdotes and gut feelings, we think we could make better decisions in our jobs. And I imagine that's going to cross over to many departments in the county. So we are very encouraged to hear about that data analyst position, and we fully support it. And I also want to echo what Judge Black said. If you have questions, please, at any time, stop by and see us. Our doors are always open, and we're very happy to entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Dunlap, the Family Court Commissioner here in St. Croix County, and I basically want to say thank you for supporting my office and what we do up there, and encourage you, if you want a good afternoon to learn about placement and where kids should go to school and child support and temporary maintenance, to come up and sit in on a few of the hearings that we have. Basically, my assistant Brenda takes care of Court Commissioner Heckman and my schedules, and they are supported by you. And so for that reason, I want to sincerely thank you for the support that you've given my office, and I appreciate it. So my doors are always open. Come on up and visit us. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's any questions? No. Thank you. I appreciate it. We have the Community Justice Collaborating Council annual report.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Keefe with the CJCC. I'm the CJCC coordinator for Community Justice Collaborating Council. I've got my annual report. If you'd like to, any questions or anything, other than that, feel free to come to any of our meetings. We meet the second Tuesday of the month. Feel free, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's a little early. Or Thursday, I'm sorry. Thank you, Andy. So, any questions, feel free to stop by and talk to me. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Mike? Otherwise, we'll move forward. Thank you. Drug court annual report, was that part of that original?
If you'd like it to be, it could be. We did submit a written report with some of the hard numbers. We refer you to that report. One additional point of information is the drug court team will be attending training next week. We obtained some grant funds to be trained in OWI treatment court or problem-solving court. What we're hoping to do is serve another segment of our population that we think is being underserved at this time. So that training is September 12th through the 15th, and we'll probably report back with more information after that training to CJCC and ultimately to this body. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but my comment is I try to get to as many of the drug court graduations as I can. I've only missed a few, but if anybody else here ever has the opportunity, it's worth going. I mean, the hard work that these people have to put in order to graduate is unbelievable, and the support that they have is worth going. So I just wanted to let the rest of the board know.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for that sentiment as well. Thank you.
Supervisor Long?
I just want to echo your comments, Judy. Thank you. I've been to a couple as well, and very moving stories, and you guys are doing a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Judge Waterman. Register of Probate Annual Report, Erica Nelson.
I'm Erica Nelson. I don't have anything to add, but I would love questions from anyone. You visit me at any time. I'm up on the second floor. Christy is going to talk next, and she's going to touch on e-filing, which has started in my office. Probates are voluntary right now, and they will be mandatory on March 1st. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Clerk of Courts Annual Report, Christy Severson.
Good evening. I'm Christy Severson, Clerk of Court for St. Croix County. I'm honored to be presenting my annual report to all of you tonight. I just have a few highlights from 2016 and 17 I want to give you. First of all, our Clerk of Court office suite was remodeled, totally remodeled, the end of last year and the beginning of this year. We added an ADA accessible front counter window as well as a centrally located media center. I want to thank Jim Ellsbury, Paul Scott, and their staffs for coming in and helping us. Their hard work and assistance was greatly appreciated. I know they came in over the Christmas holiday to help us get stuff going because we had to keep functioning as the courts during the whole time of the remodel. So it was greatly appreciated that they worked through our schedule. Also, we have finally completed permanent video conferencing and presentation equipment in all 4 courtrooms. Actually, courtrooms 3 and 4 were just completed on Friday. I should say softly completed. There's a few tweaks that we're going to do, but I want to thank the judges, John Allegro, and the IT staff for their help in getting everything working properly, as well as the county board for supporting that big KIP project, which I think is going to be a great asset to the court system. So finally, and most importantly, we have joined the majority of counties in the state of Wisconsin with mandatory e-filing. We went live on August 15th of this year. So just 3 weeks ago, our world changed from paper to electronic. We had voluntary e-filing of our civil, small claims, and family cases since 2015. But now we've converted over 3,700 cases to mandatory e-filing as of August 15th. So we had to scan all of our open and pending cases, which was a very big undertaking for my staff. So now, not only do we have family, civil, and small claims cases, but our paternity cases, all of our criminal felonies and misdemeanors, traffic, and ordinance cases are all mandatory e-filed. So this affected not only my staff, but also obviously the judges, the judicial assistants, the register and probate and their staff, the district attorney's office, the corporation counsel, child support, and sheriff's department all have a part in what the court does. And so all of those processes had to be redone and rethought out, and everyone just worked really collaboratively together to get the processes down. I want to say I think it's been relatively smooth so far. There's a few hiccups here and there, but we figure them out. We do it together, and I think it's going to be a great asset for everybody. And I cannot thank my staff enough for all the work that they did, as well as the other departments that I mentioned. It took a lot of time and effort to make it a success, and I'm very proud of everybody. So I invite you, as the judges and the court commissioners and register and probate, come on up anytime and see us. We'll be happy to give you a little tour or let you observe court, whatever you need. And are there any questions for me today?
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you,
No?
Christy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll move forward with County Administrator Report, financials.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packets, you have the financial reports through the end of July of this year, reflecting 7 months of financial activity in the all the county departments, both expenditures and revenues. We have 55% of budget remaining for the department's expenditure line items, and we're at 46% remaining to be recovered through revenues from the various departments. So 7 months in, departments are looking fairly strong. I didn't see any, with the exception of commissions and committees. We may run slightly over in our committee work, but we've tried to make adjustments in schedules, and also next year's budget, we're going to be increasing that budget a bit for county board committee work. Other than that, things are looking good financially 7 months into the year. We also have the capital improvement project status report. This is a report that is prepared by the finance department. It reflects all the capital improvement projects which this board has approved and funded for the years 2017 and 2018. A little bit later on in your agenda, you're going to be looking at the capital improvement plan going forward for our 2018 and out 5 additional years. And we're not asking for funding this evening, but it will reflect the staff work that's gone into preparing what the departmental needs are going forward for capital improvement projects. Again, that item will come up later in your agenda. But this is a very good report showing all the projects and the budgeted amount that was approved and the project total spent to date. And the finance department tries to keep this status report as current as possible. So I don't know if there's any questions. Yes.
Supervisor Berkey.
I was looking at the economic development, and I'm wondering if that 25% remaining has to do with that a big piece of their budget comes from municipalities and businesses contributing?
This is just, that line item reflects just the county's contribution towards the Economic Development Corporation. They bill us quarterly, and so we've paid 3/4 of the year. We're actually a little bit ahead of our quarterly payments, but we have 1 quarter remaining, and so that's just the county's portion. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Schoberg.
Yeah, just a question on the body cameras. I see that that's slated for $250,000 for 2018 for body camera acquisition.
Correct.
But I think we have the funding in place for that.
Correct. We have funding in place for that line item. It's not projected to be spent until 2018.
Is there a reason to wait?
There is good reason to wait because the sheriff's office is currently demoing various vendors, the products. They're going through a very extensive review. They're also in the process of developing a policy which needs to be in place prior to the acquisition of body cameras. In discussions with the sheriff's office, it probably won't be until close to the end of this year or even into 2018 before they're ready to purchase. But if they were ready to go ahead and purchase, we could still proceed in the current year if they're ready, because the funding is in place for that project to proceed, but it wasn't projected until 2018.
I'm just thinking, in light of all that's going on across the country
Yep.
with the absence of these body cameras, if we have the funding for it and the wherewithal to get it going, I'd ask the Sheriff's Department to fast track that.
Yes,
if
they are, but they want to make sure that it's done right, so it doesn't become a hindrance rather than, you know, trying to help. But yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Pat, for that report. We'll move forward with our business items at this time. And the first business item we have is a resolution authorizing placement at the 180 program, Northwest Regional Juvenile Detention Center, for periods not to exceed 365 days. So I have a motion. Supervisor Babbitt, second. Supervisor Long, the motion and second on the floor. A discussion on that. Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution has been through significant steps in other committees before coming to the board tonight. It's been approved by the Health and Human Services Board, and recently the Public Protection Committee also looked at this and approved it for movement to the board. There is a very thorough description of the program in the agenda packet for individuals that may not be familiar with this particular program. In essence, the resolution before us allows the judges to have more flexibility in terms of placement of juveniles in secure detention than they have previously had. They are happy about that since it gives them a little more room to move on what are often difficult cases. And certainly from my perspective as chair of HHS, having looked at this pretty extensively, I'm pleased about it because it offers an alternative to the Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake facility, which has been struggling, let's say, over the last year or two. And so it's nice to have a different program, different facility as an option for the judges to use. So I would definitely recommend the approval of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second. We'll move to vote on this. And that was all yeses. Thank you. Our second item is a resolution amendment number 3 to the 2017 budget, adding crime data analyst. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Brinkman, do I have a second to that? Supervisor Nelson. Discussion.
I can start off, and maybe Chair of Public Protection or some of the other committees that have discussed this. Since the inception of the CJCC, a request has been forthcoming for a staff position to collect, analyze, publish, disseminate factual information on crime, criminal offenders, victims of crime, and the operation of our judicial system. This data and the data and its analysis are critical to the CJCC and County Board as policymakers in combating crime and ensuring that justice is not only efficient but even-handed. And so the Sheriff's Office actually requested this position in the 2017 budget, but it did not make the final cut. But the need has not gone away. In fact, the need has only increased, as both the judges have mentioned. And I know Judge Lundell, he's still in the court. He's a strong proponent of this as well. And if he were here this evening, he would most likely speak on its behalf. The opportunity, why are we bringing this forward tonight, the opportunity has presented itself because we have a current vacancy, a staff position in the sheriff's office, which we're in the process of reconfiguring some of the job duties and responsibilities of that position and assigning some of the additional administrative work that this position that's currently vacant had taken on, reassigning it to some other staff people and using the current vacant position to create this data analyst position. Although it will be housed in the sheriff's office, it will really be a position that will serve the needs of many different departments at the county in terms of departments that are involved in the criminal justice system. And so the opportunity is there. The sheriff's office has signed off on this recommendation, and we've worked it out with their office. We've looked at some of the other positions that will be impacted. We've taken it to the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee for their blessing, and they have signed off on it. We've taken it in front of the Administrative Committee, and they have endorsed this budget amendment, and we recommend it take place, or if the board approves it this evening, we'll begin the process immediately of starting to recruit to fill that very important position. So I ask for your support on this resolution to amend the 2017 budget to eliminate a position in the sheriff's office, create a new position in its place, the crime data analyst position, and then reassigning various administrative functions within the office and adjusting two positions to accommodate those additional duties.
Any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote on that at this time. And that was all yeses. Thank you. We'll move on to number 3 on our agenda, which is resolution adopting amendment number 2 to the 2017 budget, adding HHS and HC social worker. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Babbitt. Do I have a second to that? Supervisor Long. Discussion. Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Department Head Johnson is here too, who perhaps could speak to this in a little bit more detail. But both of these positions are increasingly important, and I'll speak briefly to the HHS position in particular. As many of you know, due to one very important aspect of the opioid crisis, we're having a real sharp spike in the need to place children outside of their homes in the community. This has put significant pressure on the existing staff in terms of managing those placements, being part of that process. And when we feel strongly that adding this position gives us, at least for now, enough room, if you will, in terms of time for these social workers and other staff to handle this caseload. I'd like to say that we're going to see this crisis level off, but I don't see that anytime in the near future, so I think this is an important step. The health center social worker is also part of the process of remaining flexible in terms of census needs at the new facility, making sure that we can provide the necessary service there. But I would encourage board members to question Fred Johnson, who is here, if they have more specific questions to ask about this resolution. Thank you.
Are there any questions or any other discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote at this time. And that was all yeses. Thank you. We'll move on to our number 4, which is resolution authorizing the borrowing of not to exceed $27 million and providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds. Therefore, I need a motion to move on this. Supervisor Peavy, seconded by Supervisor Peterson. Discussion.
Yeah, at this time, I'll have Rob Croix come up as the Highway Commissioner and give a brief, I think we scaled down the presentation, a brief presentation on where we're at.
In respect to everyone's time, I'll be very brief tonight, but we have representation from the St. Croix County Highway Department as well as CBS Squared, which was the site selection consultant. So at any time during the very brief presentation, if you have questions or any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So as I mentioned before, this process, and we've talked about it at length at the Committee of the Whole, this process started in 2014 as a extensive remodel process to be examined. When the consultant came on board and started to look at the existing facilities, they identified certain needs and issues that a simple remodel just couldn't solve. So that brought us to the ad hoc committee formation, as well as certain criteria that were looked at as part of that process. So as they further examined that process and started to look at potential suitable sites, consultant recommendations looked at various sites throughout the county, as well as based on criteria being centrally located, being suitable size, which was identified between 40 and 50 acres for a modern highway facility, as well as suitable land values. So looking at a certain price point. Some of those price points did price us out of certain areas of this county, as well as move us to certain areas as well. So as they identified a suitable site in Baldwin, it was part of an extensive process and a very detailed process, I'd like to add, that brought Baldwin's site to the forefront. The site is of suitable size. The price was negotiated to meet the basic requirements that were set out by the ad hoc committee. The Village of Baldwin did come here tonight and speak to some of those issues, as well as to make sure you understood that they're a willing partner. So those kind of issues we brought forward and examined by the ad hoc committee. From there, we also looked at identifying a budget, as well as identifying a potential facility that could serve St. Croix County into the extensive future. So the Highway Department has worked with CBS Squared to identify a preliminary concept. It's on the screen tonight, and I apologize for the size, but the facility is approximately, with mezzanine, 130,000 square feet. The facility will serve the Highway Department in the future. We're looking at potential growth in this county that could put demand on the transportation system and will put demand on the transportation system. So we tried to identify a couple of key features, as well as build the facility that we think we need right now, not build extra, but identify areas that are highlighted in pink that if we do see growth on a rapid scale, that this facility could be upsized to handle potential growth as well as demand on our transportation system. So the facility in front of you is what we're looking at. It is certainly not an architectural model. It is going to be a rectangular concrete building that suits the needs of St. Croix County. So with that, the expansion ability I discussed, as well as updated site plans. So the site plan would accommodate, would allow us to look to the future, as well as accommodate today. And what I mean by that is we are looking at reducing our salt consumption. Doing that requires us to have a modern brine making system. That in itself isn't very expensive, but we need the room and the facilities to do that. This facility would also give us a modern wash facility. Most studies out there indicate that if proper maintenance and cleaning of your equipment is done, you can expect to see a 10% extension on that life. We currently do not have that facility under our current house to really clean and do the equipment maintenance as necessary. So I'm going to end there because I think you've all heard and seen enough through this, and open it up to any questions that you have for me at this time.
Supervisor Ring.
I
participate in the community of the whole and got the background information. Appreciate the whole process that went into this. I appreciate the Village of Baldwin being here in support as a supportive partner. But one of our stakeholders is the Village of Hammond. What happens now? What is the redevelop? This proceeds, the impact, what's the impact on Hammond and how are we dealing with that and the redevelopment of that or the sale of that property? Have you thought about that yet or is that a next step?
And I apologize, I meant to mention that at length, but we did have a meeting in the Village of Baldwin, or Village of Hammond last week. There were some concerns that came forward from the village of what was going to happen with the existing site. So we looked at length trying to stay within Hammond. That was part of the process. We identified various sites. When one couldn't be found in this Village of Baldwin site was found more suitable, we started to look at our existing site. And the existing site is about 19 acres in size. It's zoned M1, which is an industrial commercial use. So the village asked us extensively what that would be. If this modern facility does move forward and we do relocate to Baldwin, the highway department from our end, at that point we could make the change to Baldwin. We would close out our existing fuel tanks. We would do any on-site remediation that's necessary. Now, throughout the history of the highway department, there's been numerous times when we've had to do maintenance, do work, which required environmental testing. Those testings have never found anything as far as contamination or any source of concern at that point. So we're really looking at a clean site. Ironically enough, in this process of meeting with the Village of Hammond, a number of interested parties seem to be coming forward to look at redevelopment of this site. From my perspective, it's a completely county board decision that we'd have to make moving forward. We can identify and help identify whether that's reuse, whether that's outright sale, whether that's a mixed use sale, whether that's mixed use with residential in the back on partial 19 acres, commercial and industrial up front. So those are the kind of options. I think this site has a second life. I think there's going to be interest in this site. It's 19 acres in the downtown section of a growing village. So I would not be surprised at all to see an extensive amount of interest.
Are there any other questions? Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah, I just got some information from Ken Witt on there's a chart on our packet on page 82. It's the debt impact on the mill rate. And we've cranked in a 6% value growth in our tax value for use of this projection, and it goes out many years. I asked him for the historic information in the last 20 years, and all we have available without resorting to estimates of the last 12, and our average growth in tax values has been 2%, just over 2%. I'm a little concerned about the optimistic number in this graph, and I'd like to see more information on if it was historically 2%, what would the impact be? Because right now I understand for 2018 it's a slightly more than 7% increase, and almost 2% of that is from new construction. So that what that means is that we're putting a big tax increase on a lot of property owners without increasing the tax levy at all, just because of the increase in valuation. So,
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd like to call on Joe Murray. Joe is the financial side of this discussion, and Joe is our financial advisor from Springstead Incorporated and has worked with the county on numerous financial projects. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Joe, and Joe may try to address the information that Supervisor Coulter just mentioned. So good evening, Joe. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think I can answer the question that was raised from the numbers that I've presented to the administrative committee earlier this year, kind of putting in a worst-case scenario as opposed to what happens with future growth. But this evening, your task is to consider the initial authorizing resolution to issue up to $27 million in general obligation bonds to finance the construction of the new highway facility. The county has been in a very good, strong financial position, as recognized by your AA1 credit rating. That's the second highest credit rating that there is. For those of you that have been on the board and have seen me before, you've been able to take advantage of those that good credit rating and receiving very attractive rates. If you refer to my memo, which is, I believe, page 74 of your packets, you'll see that rates have been trending. They're not as good as they were a year or so ago, but they haven't spiked up as bad as everybody had been thinking. But based on the timeline that the county has in planning for a sale in March, for when you're actually going to need the money to actually be doing construction, we've tried to be conservative and added a 75 basis point market movement. That's 0.75% to try to be conservative. Hopefully rates will continue to stay low, but we've tried to give you that situation. Based on issuing the $27 million on a 20-year term, the projections that we have is that it would have a true interest cost of roughly 3.39%. The total, if you look at page 75, the total cost to borrow $27 million is roughly $38,500,000. That works out to be about $1,925,000 a year in annual debt service. So to get to the issue of the tax impact, the projections I have provided were based on that $1,926,000 increase in 2019, the first year you'd be paying debt service. That would result in an increase of about 21 cents per $100,000 of equalized value. The total cost of the full projected debt service for the whole project, start to finish, has a cost of about $519,000 to $100,000 equalized value. As was noted in the question, you have seen growth in your equalized value this year of 7%. So,
excuse me, I think you might have just misspoke.
I'm sorry.
Would you like once again to give the value of the total cost on 100,000 equalized value? I believe you said it was 519,000.
Oh, I'm sorry if I'm sorry if I misspoke. No, it's $419 per $100,000 of equalized value. That's over the entire 20-year term, start to finish, principal and interest. As was noted, your equalized value has increased by 7% this year. That $419 projection is your equalized value today. Any further increases in your equalized value, be it 2%, be it 6%, those will reduce that total cost moving forward. So I think it's kind of the worst case scenario. It's projecting a $400 increase. It didn't, my figures didn't reflect any future growth kind of moving forward. As I said, we also, as part of this process, looked at potentially refunding your 2017 state trust fund loans, but didn't see that there was enough sufficient savings to generate doing it at this time. The resolution before you this evening was prepared in conjunction with bond counsel to start the process. It's been put into your format, but it contains all the information you need to proceed with the project. It does require a 3/4 vote of the entire board. So looking to get 15 out of the 19 affirmative votes in order for this to proceed. If that does to occur, the plan would be that we would keep moving forward with bond counsel, county staff to pull together the bond sale for your meeting in March and having it adopted at that time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the process or the figures.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yeah, I got a quick question. If we vote this down and every year you put this off, it costs you $1.6 million more to build down the road. So if future boards don't do anything, any savings that we're doing now is going to cost us more down the road, correct? Because the inflation of building a facility is kind of generate out to $1.6 million a year. So if they decide not to do anything the next 4 or 5 years, any savings that we're doing right now is going to be destroyed by the because we know what the rates are now compared to what 5 years down the road is, correct?
Correct. As I think you saw in the chart showing the rates here, you'll see that they did take a spike up right after the election, and everybody thought that was going to be the beginning of a longer trend going forward, but they've actually crept down over the course of 2017 as things have settled. The Fed is still expected to do 3 rate increases. Whether or not they're going to do it this month is the chances of that have decreased from where we were back in the summer, but there is still the expectation we'll probably be looking at 2 rate increases between now and the end of 2018. It's all dependent on the economy, it's all dependent on what's happening in the world, but all expectations right now continue to be that rates are going to increase. But as somebody wise told me, there are those people who think they can forecast what rates are going to do and are wrong, and those that know that they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm definitely in that category. I don't want them to take a guess, but I do think the rates will go up.
Any other questions or any other discussion? Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah, I have a couple of concerns because I think we had this in our KIP for a considerably lower number for a while. I don't know if it's still in there that way. And I was getting used to a different number than 27 million, that's for sure. And we have the issue with our county nursing home that we've, all of our new capacity in that is run into a glitch, and we are not able to accept Medicaid reimbursable customers, so we're forced into the private pay market. That's uncertain. We're facing a projected budget shortfall coming up soon, according to the county administrator. And I haven't seen us hit the sunny side of an estimate very often yet. And so I got to vote against this. I think that the other concern I have is one that the Village of Hammond expressed at the administration committee meeting, and they said that they'd like to see the facility, instead of becoming a derelict abandoned building, get put and repurposed as part of the package before this proceeded. And I think that's very sensible, and I think the people of Hammond have been a great host for the highway department, putting up with a lot of inconveniences from time to time as a result. I think we owe them some consideration for that. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Supervisor Long.
This is kind of a tough one for me because I know that something definitely needs to be done. The need is very clear, and I've expressed that to both Robbie and Todd. It's also, I'm kind of guessing this is probably going to pass, so I just wanted to explain my vote. Because I'm going to vote against the resolution, and it's not so much against this particular need, but I'm just really concerned about the what I would consider to be excessive borrowing and spending. Kind of on a little binge right now. I think in the last 3 to 4 years, we're probably in excess of $60 million without taxpayer approval, and that makes me very uncomfortable. So I just wanted to explain the reason why I'm going to vote against the resolution.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Peterson.
I think I'm probably known as a pretty conservative supervisor, but being on this committee and also have been around this facility over there in Hammond enough to see that, yes, there are other issues in the county, but they shouldn't reflect on this project. And we've done our homework, we've done our due diligence, and the committee has unanimously supports this proposal. It wasn't just county board members on it or highway members on it. There were citizen members also, several of which were from Hammond. So on that note, I fully support this proposal, and I certainly hope my other fellow supervisors will. Thank you.
Supervisor Ard.
I'd like to remind this board that you have all taken a leap of faith on a number of occasions in order to bring this county into the 21st century. Boards that came before you did not have that vision or foresight, and that is why we are doubling down now. They did not take care of their buildings and their assets. They did not address issues at the time when they could have been easily fixed for very little monies. If we do not act on these major projects at this time, we will be doing no one any favors, because we will be spending more in the future and we will be dealing with derelict properties which we cannot run service from, nor should we. So I will ask you all to give great consideration to what has not been done in the past and the great work that this board has done in the previous present.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Babbitt.
I appreciate Supervisor Ard's commentary as well as the others who have chimed in here, and I have to agree, even though I've only been on the board about 3.5 years now, it has struck me how past boards have handled some of these major issues, and my sense is that they essentially haven't. And so we've been put in the position of essentially having to do these projects. Whether it's the 911 infrastructure, whether it's updating the nursing home, and now the highway department. When I first came on the board and was told that the old HHS building had been condemned because it was in such terrible shape, it was a shock to me to imagine that we were still allowing county employees to go to work every day in a building like that, which I've personally spent time in, at least before it was destroyed, to bring on a beautiful new facility now. I'm not without some nerves about the monetary side of this. I appreciate Supervisor Coulter's commentary and Supervisor Long's, but I would agree in the end with Supervisor Ard that this is a project that just needs to get done. I think Supervisor Peterson and other members of the subcommittee have worked extremely hard to get us to this point. I think this is a moment for a yes vote.
Any other discussion, questions? Supervisor Brinkman.
I think members of the admin committee will remember me showing up 2 years ago saying, we're going to have to do a county maintenance building at some point. At that time, I was told that $20 million was crazy and we could do it much cheaper than that, and then to see this come up as it is concerning to me. When I figure in the last 3.5 years we've borrowed $38,700,000. We've already committed to 2 more borrowings of $5 million apiece for KIP projects over the next 4 years, I believe it is. You add on $27 million, that's $75,400,000 and some $1,000 borrowed. That scares me, especially when I look at what's going on with, we could very well be without a wheel tax here in a year or 2. And that's going to be $800,000 a year we're going to have to figure out how to recoup, because our roads need it. And I appreciate the work the people have done on this committee. I just feel at this time it's too much money to spend on this project.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thanks. Just 2 things. One, first, the wheel tax is an operating expense that goes towards that. It's not going to go into a long-term asset like a county shot. Well, it's a different category. There's other, going back to Supervisor Nelson's comments, there's other reasons that we need to do this, that the cost, long-term cost of doing this, we've got a building that needed, we were given a choice like 3 years ago, fix these things. We had a consultant that said, fix these things for about $1 million, or you can do a short-term patch if you begin the process of moving to a new facility about now, for about, what was it, 250,000, is that right? So we chose the $250,000 option, hoping that we could get to this point and making a calculated choice. So here we are at this point, having not spent the $1 million, taking the calculated choice that we would save that $750,000 so that we could put it toward this project. We need to stop driving this 53 jalopy because it needs a transmission and it needs a timing belt and it needs every single thing that could possibly go wrong. And we continue to fix it nickel and dime, nickel and dime, nickel and dime. And it's just not going to keep running. This isn't a Cuban taxi cab. We can't keep doing it. We have to do this thing. And it's not conservative to not fund this thing. It is not conservative to keep using junk that's fallen apart. We're not doing the taxpayers a single bit of good by using something that doesn't work, that's dangerous to work in, that puts our employees at risk. It's time to move on and build this facility. Let's vote yes.
Any other questions or discussion? Not, Supervisor Ring.
I have a question of clarification. Recently, we passed a policy, and I need a reminder of what that was when we have a sale of an asset. So theoretically, I mean, the decision hasn't been made, but we do have the 19 acres in Hammond. If that is converted and there is a sale of that property, what does our policy say? Could that go to reduce the cost of this, or does that just go into the general fund? Can you refresh my memory?
I believe it does not go directly into the general fund. It is utilized for debt reduction or capital improvement projects. So it does not just fall to the general fund. The administration committee would be involved in those discussions, as the full board would, but it would be a matter of either applying it towards debt reduction or applying it towards future capital improvement projects.
Just to follow up on that, I don't think I saw it in here, but in the past we've looked at what the median value, property value is, and then looked at what that is. So it seems to me a reasonable cost over 20 years of a total bill of a $419 on $100,000. But what is our median property value here? So
I think it's 247,000, give or take, right, Ken?
Pretty close. I don't remember the exact number either, but it's in the mid 200,000 range. So roughly, for the average household, $1,000 over 20 years for this facility.
Supervisor Calder.
Yeah, if, you know, and I certainly identify with all the hard work and all of the, it would be nice to have a nice shiny Cadillac. No question about that for our highway department. And I'm very impressed with some of the work that they've recently been doing on my behalf, finding information and so forth. But, and maybe, and there's another thing that gets thrown around here oftentimes. I hear that Madison imposes levy limits on us, and so we have to deal with those. And I just want to remind everybody that Madison doesn't impose those on us. We can raise the levies if we want to. We just need the voters' permission. So I'm going to suggest that that's what we should do with this and put this up to the voters. And I'm going to make a motion that we refer this to the voters for a binding referendum.
Second of that, right?
Yeah, needs a second.
Need a second? Supervisor Brinkman. So this time, is there any questions on this motion that just hit the floor? So Supervisor Schoberg.
I remember a cold winter when I was out knocking on doors, and I knocked on lots of doors, and lots of people voted, and they decided to have me represent them. And we are a system of a republic government, and if I vote in favor of this, which I plan on doing because of the due diligence, and while I also agree I'm not one to kick the can down the road anymore, I'm the one to take responsibility. The voters have next April to vote me out of office. But until then, I'm going to act responsibly and intelligently, and I'm going to try to do the right thing here. So I don't think this is akin to a school district where it's a monster effort, Herculean effort to have a referendum. I mean, that's a lot of work. I don't know who in this room has that much time to get something like that done. The way our board responds to needs like this is to have a committee work thoroughly on it. That's what we've done. And we're now in a proper legal position to take action. So I would oppose putting this to a referendum. Maybe something else down the road should go to referendum, but this isn't it. Thanks.
Any other discussion?
Just for clarification from Corp Counsel, the supervisor's amendment or motion would be an amendment to the motion that's on the floor, correct?
That is correct. It's an amendment to the pending resolution to authorize up to $27 million of bonds. And it is allowable to make a resolution contingent upon passage of a referendum. So it's in order, appropriate. You can debate it and then vote on it.
Any other discussion? Supervisor.
If this were to go to referendum, that means it would be in April. And the bond market will significantly change by April. I think we can all see that. We have made a commitment to our constituents, and I would believe that everyone at this table has done their due diligence in speaking with their constituents about all of the information contained in this packet, and that they have taken remarks from their constituents as to how they feel about it. My constituency is behind this proposal, and many of them have homes that will hit that high price mark when the taxes start hitting. But they're willing to do it because they understand St. Croix County is growing. We need a highway department that can keep up with the growth of the county. If you've been to the highway department lately and you've seen the trucks, you can see the varying colors of green. And the reason that they are different shades of green is because of the sun damage that happens when your vehicles are outside. If you look at the amount of rust and wear and tear on vehicles that start at $250,000 and go up, which are so required to maintain our roads in all weather, there should be no question in your mind that we're throwing money down the tube every single day and every season. This is a building that needs to be done. It can't be kicked down the road any longer. If we do not take advantage of this opportunity, we will be paying many times more what we are currently looking at. It's time to have belief in yourselves and belief in the experts that we have serving as staff in the county who are helping to direct us.
Supervisor Berkey.
I just wanted to make a comment as a committee member of the Ad Hoc Transportation Study Committee, of which I want to commend the makeup of that committee, of which there are members of the Transportation Committee, there are other county board members, including myself, there were individuals from the community. I felt that it was very comprehensive, extensive, fair. We did work hard. We met a lot. We continue to meet. I would like to ask that my fellow board members support the resolution and not support the amendment to the resolution. Thank you.
Supervisor Peterson.
I'll vote against the proposed amendment also, and just a caveat, I'm not sure how many remember in that report that the cost for heating 1,000 square feet, there was a nice chart in there, and the newer facilities obviously are much more efficient than what we have, and I think that's going to take some explaining to the taxpayers if somebody votes down that.
I'm going to ask for a vote at this time. I think we had enough discussion on it. And this is on the amendment to the resolution. There's a motion and a second for that, so. Three yeses, the rest no. The amendment failed. We have the original resolution. I think we've had probably enough discussion. Unless there's more that wants to go on, I think we have to call for the vote for the resolution for borrowing the $27 million. Dave Peterson. So I just want to remind everybody this takes a supermajority, so it takes 15 of the board members for this to pass, just so everybody's aware of that. So thank you. And it passes 15-3. So that passes, and we'll move forward from there. Thank you. Our next resolution comes up as a resolution authorizing of 53 acres in the village of Baldwin for the construction of the new highway facility. Supervisor Peavy, motion, seconded by Supervisor Osnes. Discussion. Supervisor Peavy.
Yeah, just to remind everybody, and Rob went over it earlier, this site was picked after, I don't know, we started with like 18 different sites, narrowed it down. We did numerical rating. This was a very specific choice of property. This came out way ahead of anything else. As you heard Tracy and Willie Zevenberger comment, the Village of Baldwin is in favor of it, and I request everybody to support this purchase.
Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and second on the floor, so we'll vote on that. One no, the rest yeses, so that resolution passes also. Our next resolution is a resolution of...
Mr. Chair, I think there's a request for...
Excuse me?
Supervisor Nelson would like a break.
Like a break? How does everybody feel? You want a break for? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break. Everybody went, but we're gonna start our meeting. We have enough here to go forward. Our next resolution on the floor is a resolution opposing sections 52 and 53 of Assembly Bill 456 and Senate Bill 374 relating to vehicle registration fee. I need a motion by Peterson and a second by Supervisor Osnes. Discussion on that. You want to take that, Mr. Osnes?
I can start off,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a resolution that comes to you from the Transportation Committee urging the state to oppose or remove language from Senate Bill 374 and Assembly Bill 456, which contains language mandating that counties that have a vehicle registration fee currently in place, or counties contemplating adopting a vehicle registration fee, that those initiatives would go as in the form of a referendum to be voted upon. St. Croix County was the very first county in the state to adopt a vehicle registration fee. We adopted it in 2008. It currently generates approximately $800,000 annually for highway maintenance purposes, and it's very specific in the adopting language of that registration fee, the resolution that was passed by the board, that it be specifically designated for highway maintenance purposes, not for other general fund use, not for winter maintenance, but specifically for highway operations and maintenance. The language that the state is proposing is that if this were to be approved by the state legislature, that within 18 months time frame, St. Croix County would have to take this in the form of a referendum to the public to be approved. And I think there's only 5 counties in the state right now and a couple of municipalities that have vehicle registration fees, but many counties in the state are contemplating, those that don't have vehicle registration fees. Many counties that I've been in touch with and have discussed with their administrators, many are contemplating this because of the levy limits and other issues financially that counties are faced with. They're looking for other avenues to try to bolster their operations budgets. And so this language, if approved by the board, would try to send a message to the state that we have something good in place here and we want to keep it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? Supervisor Osmus?
I'd like to make an amendment to the resolution. On line 30, after Governor Scott Walker, period, that we add that the St. Croix County Clerk notify all 71 other counties through their clerks of the results of our vote tonight and pass on the resolution to each of them.
Need a second. Second. Supervisor Peavy. Any discussion on the amendment? Supervisor Coulter?
Yeah, no, I read someplace else that this would apply to increases in the wheel tax. Does that, because right now we're at the max. Are we at the max?
No, we're not.
So then by recommending this recommendation, if it prevailed, we'd be saying if we wanted to increase it, we could just do that without consulting the voters, correct?
Correct, I believe so. It currently is allowable if the board chooses to. What they haven't, you know, we still have the same fee in place that was approved in 2008. It's never been increased. The board could, it would have the option. I don't know if there's a maximum allowed. I don't know if the state has a maximum, but we're at the same level that we were in 2008, and we haven't increased it.
In relation to that, Mr. Coulter, we did have a conversation on a couple of occasions where folks wanted it to go up to $20 for a year or two and come back down to 10, and we said that was too big a hassle. The clerk's got to do a ton of paperwork on that. It's got to be down to Madison before the first of the year, and you got to go through that entire year. You can't go in the middle of that, and then to do that for a single year and then go through the same process and bring it back down. Previous boards have just decided, let's just leave it at a flat rate of $10, and we were fine with that.
So Supervisor Octoroff.
I don't know if this pertains to the amendment, but I'm going to vote, I approve of what we're doing, but if we would have to have a referendum, is it open-ended so that unless there's a financial change, it would exist for eternity, so to speak? Or is there a finite amount of time that the amendment's allowable for, or don't you know? I mean, like with school referendums, it's usually for a certain length of time that something's going to happen. I'm wondering about this one.
Well, our highway commissioner's back there.
Robbie? Why don't we vote on the amendment first, and then
Okay.
we'll go back into the original resolution? So does everybody understand what the amendment was to the resolution to send this to the other counties throughout the state? So there's a motion and a second on the floor to amend it to that. So if it's all right, everybody, it's time to vote on that amendment. One no, the rest are yeses, so that passes. Now we're back to the original resolution. Is there any other discussion on the original Supervisor Long?
I really like these resolutions to be as factual and objective as we can make them. And I think line 23, when we're basically saying another attempt to eliminate or reduce local control, I think is a matter of opinion. I would argue, and after looking at these bills, that it's really not about local control, but it's really more about disclosure and being transparent to our taxpayers. So I read the bill and it kind of says to me that, well, hey, you can have a vehicle registration tax, no problem. Just make sure your taxpayers are okay with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if we can go and justify that to the taxpayers, we shouldn't have any problem. We shouldn't be concerned about losing that revenue. I mean, and if we're concerned about that, you know, are we scared of going to the voters? So I think this is really about disclosure and not about local control. And I think that's a good thing. I think we should be supporting these bills so that we can be transparent and accountable to the taxpayers.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Brinkman?
Mr. Chairman, I still have one question. Do we know how often we would have to hold a vote? If we're going to continue with the wheel tax, is it every year? I personally think that gives ultimate control to the local people, the voters. I do believe that, so, okay.
Any other discussion? Not seeing any. We have a motion second on the floor. To vote on the bill for the registration fees. So Cindy gets it up there, we'll vote on that. Three no, the rest yeses, that passes. So we will move on to number 7 on our list tonight. That's a resolution requesting state law change, allowing counties to use the design-built construction method and update the statutory building requirements. Do I have a motion to that effect from anybody? Okay, Supervisor Coulter and Supervisor Schoberg seconds it. Discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, is there,
Go ahead.
ready to go? Currently, state law does not allow counties to utilize the option of design build. We don't have that option. In your packet, we sent along some background information that explains what design build is. It's actually the ability to hire a firm, contractor, call it what you will, that can both complete the design and the contract or construction management of the project. Currently, right now, we bid out both of those services separately because we have to. We don't, counties, unlike other units of government, in the state, including the state, which does have the ability to utilize design build, does not allow counties that option. And so we're asking the state for the ability to at least have the option. It's not we're saying that we would be required to use the design build, but we could utilize that option if the board so chooses. And then also secondarily, it increases the dollar limits for public works contracts. Currently, the language is $25,000. We're asking that be increased to $250,000 for public works contracts. And also the posting requirements, we're asking that the language be increased to $50,000 for Class 1 posting notices. The dollar limits that are currently in law are many, many years old and antiquated, and we need to update them to reflect current markets and current costs. So the resolution is requesting assistance from the state to again allow the county to utilize design build as an alternative, and then to also increase those dollar amounts. This resolution comes in front of you from the administration committee, which approved it. Thank you.
Nelson.
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to this. You can go to line 9, and it says method and authorizes that process to be followed. Well, actually, it should be in tying up with the top part. It should say that change followed to allowed. So you still have the options to have a different type, if not just design build, but whatever projects and processes fit hand in hand instead of just. But what this says right here is that's, to me, it has to be followed, that you do it this way. But allowed puts it together that you can do both processes.
Do I have a second to that? Supervisor Babbitt. Discussion on the amendment. If there's no discussion.
So your amendment is to use the word allowed rather than followed?
Yeah, because if you
substitute the word
allowed for followed.
Rather than followed.
Because up top, the resolution requests a state law change allowing counties to use the design build construction.
Yeah.
But it also says that it's, we still have the ability to use the other process also.
Correct, okay.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment to make it allowed.
Yes, he's next to Ken.
That's all yeses, so it'll be amended to say allowed. Now, on the original resolution, is there any more discussion on the original resolution? Any questions? Nothing? Supervisor Brink?
You had me at motion by Coulter, second by Schoberg.
Yeah. Okay, now we have a motion and a second. We will vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. Our next resolution is the resolution establishing library distribution for 2018. I have a motion from Supervisor Schoberg, a second. Supervisor Ard. Thank you. Discussion. Supervisor Schoberg.
We have to address this each year to allow the levy for the payment of the county services provided by our many libraries in the county. And several years ago, a decision was made to fund the libraries at 100% of their costs, not at some lesser amount of their costs, which then means that when a rural resident, those are the ones that are paying this tax, go to any one of our libraries, they pay the same amount per book as does any of the members of that municipality that supports the library directly. To do otherwise would mean that the local municipalities would be subsidizing the rural residents, and several years ago, that was concluded to not make sense. So I would ask that we continue to fund all of our libraries at 100%. While that had begun several years ago, it wasn't until last year that we also decided to do the same for the libraries that are outside of St. Croix County. So when our residents go to Eau Claire or any other county supported library, we would also be reimbursing those libraries for the full equal cost, not more, but the full cost of what it costs to produce that book for that person taking that out. So that part only seems fair. The other issue came up a couple years ago, and now it comes up again, and that relates to the library located in my municipality of Hudson, which happened to change to a joint library several years ago, actually back in 2002. Well, this resolution that we passed last year artfully portrays the history of why we had to do last year what we are going to have to do again this year. And that is when we approved as the county the formation of the joint library, it was based upon the promise that the joint library members would go ahead and collect the tax from all those municipalities, but when those members of those municipalities visit the library of Somerset, New Richmond, River Falls, Baldwin, and there's one other, that the joint library would do what we used to do and go ahead and allocate the funds that they are now the tax collecting municipality of and distribute those funds to the neighbors. And that happened just nicely for about 11, 12 years until all of a sudden someone decided that Hudson Library would be better off if they just kept all the money. Well, they are better off. And so they asked their lawyer, can we do this? And the lawyer said, yes, you can legally. The lawyer didn't answer the question, is this ethical or moral? So where we're at right now is that we tried to find out what we can do legally, and we can't totally restore the negatively affected neighbors, but we can do something to mitigate the damage. At any time that the Hudson Area Joint Library chooses to renew its promise to pay out the fair allocation, then we will certainly renew our 100% support to the Hudson Area Library. But what we are legally allowed to do is to withhold 30% because the state statute says we have to pay 70% of what the county collects and pay that over to Hudson. But the 30% that we withhold, we can send to the neighbors within our county. And so that's what I'm asking us to do again this year. If I hear that the Hudson Area Joint Library is promising to renew its pledge and go ahead and allocate fully like it had done for 11 years, then we'll come back and revisit this in time of the budget, at the budget. So this is a budget adjustment that we're doing now so that all these libraries can forecast what their own budgets will be. I did hear from River Falls, I heard from Baldwin, I heard from Somerset, I heard from New Richmond that thanks for restoring part of the funds. So we've done everything we can fairly short of whatever cajoling can still do. But until such time as there's different leadership in the municipalities that supply the trustees to the Hudson Area Joint Library, I don't anticipate a change. So I would ask that you support this resolution to fully fund all of the county libraries and to again make the adjustment of the Hudson Joint Area Library funding so that we can mitigate the damage that's done to its neighbors. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions, Supervisor Coulter?
Yeah, I just have a question. Roy has a different understanding of what's going on here than I do. And I want to ask this question of our county administrator, perhaps. And if we didn't do this and we just funded Hudson at 100% of the distribution of the users tax that we collect from rural users, would they be treated any differently than any other library in the county? And would they be treating any other libraries any differently than those libraries are treating them? I mean, he's made it sound like all the other libraries distribute a bunch of money to a bunch of other libraries, and Hudson's the only one that doesn't. The way I understand it is that the county collects the rural users tax, and that gets distributed to the libraries who service those customers that don't have their own libraries.
Go ahead.
Supervisor Joberg.
If you would look, Supervisor Coulter, at packet page 200, that would show you that what we are doing is going to reallocate $25,286 amongst those libraries that Hudson itself should have paid. And we're probably allocating $25,000 when Hudson itself would have paid $40,000 according to its promise. It is true that only Hudson, when it formed its joint library, was the one that had to agree in order to get our approval to become a joint library. It is only Hudson that said, yes, we can do this. And I know that Scotty Ard's mother was there. I know that Buck Malik was there. And we heard all of this 2 years ago. And every library outside of the Hudson area library is supportive of this action that we're taking.
Supervisor Ard.
I am a member of the library board in the city of New Richmond, and I spend a great deal of time at other libraries throughout the county, and I can tell you the impact from the Hudson Joint Library without paying its due on circulation fees has had a great impact on all of the libraries. And there is no library in this county that would ever refuse service to someone who's coming from the membership of the Hudson Joint Library. Our libraries excel at service. That is why they are standing. It is unfortunate that the board of the Hudson Joint Library has not been able to get their finances in order to keep that library going and establish it on a sound financial basis, that it has come to this point. But for each day that those doors are closed at the joint library, those residents are coming to other municipalities to utilize services, and that costs those libraries monies. The purpose of this is to, in some small way, help those libraries gain back some of the money and the cost that they're expending for circulation. And it is costing a great deal because of the joint library. So I strongly urge you to support this.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Coulter.
I didn't get an answer to my question from the administrator.
You would have to repeat your question and be specifically clear, and I may have to rely on the finance director to specifically answer your question, but I would ask you to rephrase it, please.
My understanding is this total distribution is the distribution of the tax that the county collects from rural users who do not have a community-supported library.
The two numbers that I'm looking at are for the Hudson, the line for Hudson at 100%
cost of rural circulation versus 70% cost of rural circulation.
Yeah.
And what this resolution will do will be to take the difference between that and redistribute that dollar amount to those other rural libraries. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I understand Supervisor Coulter's question, and it's because the rural libraries that are part of the joint library are exempted from the formula, from the county formula. And so that's where the math gets goofy on this whole thing. So when we take a look at the distribution, we're not levying those townships, and the amount that they're paying to support their joint library is different than what the county is levying to support all the other libraries. And that's where the difference comes in between the joint library and how all the other libraries in the counties are treated.
Does that
Supervisor Long.
answer your question, Supervisor Coulter?
No.
Okay. Bob, can you help?
I think the way that I would describe it is, were it not for the Hudson Area Joint Library, the town of Hudson, North Hudson and St. Joseph would be in that group that we would be levying our county tax as part of the rural users. And so we would have a larger base of taxpayers to fund the rural use of the other libraries. But by those three communities joining into the joint library, it takes that rural usage and sends it all over to the Hudson Library. Does that help?
Okay, well, that's very nice. That's the best answer I've heard so far, Bob. So, and that's my understanding. So the people in North Hudson and the town of Hudson and the town of St. Joe support the Hudson Library with their tax dollars through their levy. And then, therefore, they're exempt from the rural users library tax, which everyone who doesn't support a local library does pay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, very good.
Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah. My real beef with this is that, so they formed the joint library. And my understanding is that when they did that, they made this agreement to pay some kind of retribution, mitigation, whatever you want to call it, to the other rural users. But that actually, the way it's been explained to me is that the library board who did that did not have the legal authority to do so. The other thing I got to ask is that, and I know this comes up all the time with in the village of North Hudson where I live, is that we contribute via the levy, our levy dollars, to support the Hudson Library. And so we aren't paying, we're paying that instead of the rural, instead of each resident being assessed the rural users tax on their homes. We're still paying. Okay? Now, why would anybody, I think this is the silliest deal ever in the world. Why would somebody go to the trouble to exempt themselves from this tax and then choose to pay it in a different way? I mean, that's subterfuge of the highest order. Only governments can do that. So what I'd suggest to you is that it was a dumb deal to make in the first place, and our business here isn't to perpetuate dumb deals. And also, if there was some kind of legal, actual legal standing for anyone to sue the Hudson Library to recover this money, then they should do that. And that this is not, we don't wear black robes here. We're not the forum for that. So all I'm asking, I have to vote against this, and it's $25,000, not a, it would look nice in my bank account, but it's not a big deal when you're running a big library. And keep in mind that Hudson does about 25%, a quarter of the lendings in the county, and does it in a very efficient way. And they teeter between red and black all the time. Some of the other libraries are pretty flush. So this is just ridiculous.
Final comment, if I may. A rebuttal. So let's just suppose I lived in the village of North Hudson, and for convenience, I work in New Richmond, and I go to that library, and I have a 2-year-old child, and I check out 3-4 books every single week. Now, on your scenario, I should just pay my tax to the Joint Library of Hudson, and nothing gets reallocated to the village or to New Richmond. So this was all anticipated when the Joint Library was formed. And the Joint Library municipalities said, we understand your problem. It's not ridiculous. It's not subterfuge. We're agreeing to be fair. So when our North Hudson members visit local libraries outside, since we're the only one collecting the tax, only we can reallocate it. We've asked the county to quit being our tax collector. We're going to be the tax collector, and if you give us joint library permission, we will reimburse those neighbors because we're the only one collecting the money. That's why. Otherwise, you're having the rural areas pay for your village of North Hudson when these people visit the New Richmond Library. We've caught you, and we're trying to do something about it. Legally, I wasn't around in 2002 to draw up that contract, but had I been, it would have been a different contract, which would have said, if you stop making the allocations, you automatically lose your joint library. But no, the shortcoming was we agreed on the honesty of the Joint Library Board that if we granted this approval, we'll just go ahead and grant it. And Buck Malik said, they'll never change their minds, because they understood that they're the only tax collectors, they're the only ones that can reimburse the neighbors. And I don't know how you see it differently, but if you want to just keep all the money for yourselves in poor little Hudson, if that's what you're saying, then you can vote no.
Any other discussion? We have a motion. Quick? Okay, Supervisor Long.
Let's try to take the emotion out of this issue a little bit and look at it strictly from a policy standpoint. And the question I would have for everyone is it appropriate, or is it even morally appropriate for us to penalize an entity for something that they had every legal right to do, just from a policy standpoint? Because that's basically what we're doing. We're penalizing Hudson for doing something that they have every right to do, and whether we like it or not or agree with it, just from a policy standpoint, we really shouldn't be penalizing them.
Supervisor Octoroff.
From a legal standpoint, you can look at what happened today with the kids of Mexico. It's legal, but is it right? And by doing this, we're trying to make it better. And maybe $25,000 isn't a lot, but to some of these libraries, that's a program. And that's what Hudson Library agreed to. But the way it was written up, there were some escape routes which they chose to use. But that doesn't mean it's right, and that doesn't mean it's fair. This is trying to be the fairest way this county, the previous county board, saw to take care of the situation. Because in regards to suing, the only way this can happen is if one library brings a lawsuit against Hudson. And they're not going to do that because the libraries are great in St. Croix County. They're there for everybody. So they don't want negativeness. We're here to try and make it as equitable as possible, and by doing it this way, it hurts a lot of libraries a lot less. Whereas if Hudson keeps everything, it helps them tremendously, and it hurts to an even larger extent the other libraries that should have been owed money from Hudson. I think this is the right thing to do.
Supervisor Peterson.
I would suggest that if the Library Association feels they're being mistreated by the county, come back into the fold and we'll treat you equally with everybody else.
Okay. So we probably had enough discussion on this. So we have a motion and a second on the floor on the library resolution. I think I'll call for the vote at this time. Three noes, and the rest yes, it passes. So thank you, everyone. We'll move on to our number 9 resolution, adopting the capital improvement plan for 2018 to 2022. I have a motion, Supervisor Schoberg, seconded by Supervisor Berkey. Discussion.
I'll just say a few words. As I mentioned in my financial report this evening regarding the CIP, what this resolution in front of you tonight, sponsored by the Administration Committee, does is it approves the plan going forward for the CIP for 2018 through 2022. 2018 is already funded. There are no new projects over and above what was approved for 2018. Those projects have already been approved and funded. What's really different about this plan is that it starts to look forward 5 years, looks out 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. In your packet, you have a list of approximately 50 CIP projects. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are the projects that are new projects going forward, 2019 and beyond. This resolution does not approve funding for the projects in 2019 and beyond. We'll be bringing forward a financing plan for the CIP in March of 2018. So this resolution, all it does is approves the CIP plan, which was put together by staff. A lot of good work went into this. We took the advice of from the board in our discussions in terms of prioritization. We are trying to utilize the residual funds or fund balance in the financing plan going forward for reoccurring items, i.e. there's some discussion about should or should not transportation-related vehicles be included in the CIP. They do qualify for CIP funding. We heard you, we heard the concerns of some board members, and so we will utilize existing fund balance in our financing plan that will bring before you in March to utilize those dollars for transportation-related vehicles versus borrowed dollars. I don't know if there are any questions. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going through each and every project. If you have individual specific questions, we can try to address them. But this has been pretty well vetted through the staff team and then also the Administration Committee and Committee of the Whole.
Supervisor Coulter.
Yeah, so my understanding that anything that's on this list is planned to be spent, funded with borrowed money?
Or there's the different funding avenues will be residual dollars in the CIP. For example, Christy Severson's court renovation, IT renovation in terms of video conferencing in all the courtrooms came in considerably under budget. Those dollars will remain in the CIP, and they will be reallocated in future CIPs in terms of the financing plan. Also, the board's policy for fund balance, undesignated fund balance is 40%, give or take, minus or plus 3%. If the fund balance exceeds 40%, that is a potential use for funding the CIP going forward. And then also borrowed dollars. So it's made up of combination of 3 different funding sources. As I said earlier, this resolution does not recommend any funding options for the projects 2019 and beyond. That'll come before you with a separate action in March of 2018.
Supervisor Brinkman.
So, Mr. Administrator, on packet page 204, 205, it looks like, so you're saying the KIP is only those projects that are highlighted in yellow?
Those are the new projects in the CIP in 2019 and beyond.
So then I go back, then I go to page 206. At least that's what it says here, packet page. Yeah, it looks like it. And I see squad cars are back in there.
Yeah, squad cars are a reoccurring item. So they are not highlighted. They're not highlighted in yellow.
We're not going to use KIP money for those, are we?
We will use, as I mentioned, we will be utilizing existing CIP residual dollars or the use of fund balance over and above the 40% as an alternative funding source for squad cars.
What if there is none? What if we're not at 40%?
If we're not at 40% and we don't have any residual CIP dollars, which I don't foresee happening because I know that we will have residual CIP dollars. If there isn't, then we will bring forward a funding recommendation in March of next year to try to fund these projects. There's some unknowns, and that's why we won't be bringing forward a financing recommendation until the spring of next year.
Thank you.
All 2018 projects are already funded.
Supervisor Coulter.
What proportion of residual CIP dollars were borrowed in the first place? Do you know that number?
Not sure what you mean. When I say residual dollars, I mean we started the funding for the CIP in 2017. Those projects that have been approved for 2017 and 2018, if they come in under budget, which I know several of them will be, those dollars fall to the bottom line of the CIP. Those dollars will be used first and foremost for reoccurring items, i.e. squad cars. The remaining projects will be most likely funded with additional borrowed funds.
Okay, so for 2017, all of the KIP was funded with borrowed dollars, right? Pretty much?
Bob?
What proportion?
We transferred $2.3 million of fund balance into the KIP. We borrowed $4.9 million, and we transferred $500,000 from the HHS fund balance to the KIP. So, whatever that percentage works out to.
Thank you, Ken.
Supervisor Long.
I just want to encourage everybody really to look through all these projects in a lot of detail. I'm just, personally, I'm a little concerned when I see things like we're going to borrow money for camping cabins. Kind of raises a little bit of a red flag for me. So I know we're not voting to fund, but, you know, when we get to that point, I think it's really important to go through this in a lot of detail, and I would just encourage everybody to do that.
Supervisor Ard.
What concerns me in looking at capital improvement plans, especially when we're talking about vehicles, and especially when we're talking about either law enforcement vehicles or vehicles used by staff which gain high mileage, if any of the monies other than cash reserves are being used to pay for those vehicles, you're turning over a vehicle in possibly 3 years, because they just get wear and tear and high mileage. So using any funds that have been borrowed to pay for such a short turnover just does not make good fiscal sense. So I would really like to see items that have a short life put onto a cash reserves list rather than using bonding dollars, and look at our long-term CIP projects, which have a life of 15 to 20 years. I could rest easy utilizing additional bonding monies that have been held over from other projects for bonding those. But when we're looking at short term, it makes it difficult. The other thing that I found that was missing, we have a significant number of projects which state there will be revenue. I'd like to see the projected revenue. It may not be accurate based on the little houses for cabins, but doing some type of an analysis and projection of what will the use be, what is the revenue, what are we looking at down the road? Because that only makes sense. The parks, the improvements to shelters, trails, all of that has the feasibility of being revenue generating. But I have no idea what kind of revenue could possibly be generated. So there's no offset presented.
Supervisor Nelson.
Pat, can I reiterate that you said that these yearly things like the squad cars are the first ones we're going to try to go with residual money to take care of that problem?
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Supervisor Berkey.
Just a final remark, and then I think we should vote. But in comment to follow up on Supervisor Long's concern, as I understand from our administrator, being on the administration committee and having reviewed each of these there, and then also in the committee meeting of the whole, and then for tonight, that on an annual basis, we'll have an opportunity as a board to review each year this list of expected KIP projects from year to year, and we can make some modifications from year to year.
That's correct. The CIP, although it's not an operating budget item per se, every year in the operating budget there will be a CIP section where the capital projects are laid out for the board for discussion. But they're not part of the bottom line for what you're considering as the traditional operating budget, because these will be funded, these projects will be funded on a every other year basis, and they will be utilizing non-tax levy dollars in terms of your normal operating budget. Yeah.
We can make some modifications,
yes,
which I think is positive.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will vote on the resolution adopting the capital improvement plan. And that passes 2 noes, the rest yeses. Thank you. Number 10, adopting the 2017-19 strategic plan vision, mission, guiding principles, and strategic goals. I have a motion. Supervisor Berkey, second. Supervisor Osnes. Any discussion? No questions? We have a motion and a second. We'll vote. That's all yeses. Thank you. Number 11, resolution updating personal policy handbook, chapter 1, I guess it says on there. So I have a motion. Supervisor Berkey, do I have a second? Supervisor Matadian, I hope. Any discussion? We have a motion, a second on the floor on the handbook.
Are there any questions regarding, a little background on this? The Wisconsin Supreme Court recently issued an opinion that changes the way local governments, counties apply the open meetings law posting requirements. Long story short, the Appleton School District had a committee set up to review books, and they advised the school district on which books to purchase, which not. Anyway, someone took this all the way up to the Supreme Court, arguing that that committee should have to comply with the open meetings law. There was a battle that ensued, and the Supreme Court ruled that because this committee made up of staff people advised the district on which books to purchase and which not, that it falls within the parameters of the open meeting law posting requirements. So we did a review of if this court decision would impact any of our existing advisory committees. There is one. It's the Staff Advisory Committee. The way that the personnel policy is drafted, the legal opinion from our corporation counsel is that we would need to post all those staff advisory meetings. The staff advisory, a little bit of history, that was established a couple of years ago actually by the county administrator to involve staff in policy decisions, recommendations that I would be bringing forward in front of the board or the administration committee. I wanted to involve all different components of the departments at a line level, staff level, take issues in front of them, have open dialogue, have them give feedback to me before I formulate a recommendation to bring forward. My recommendation is that we keep the staff advisory currently as it is. It's advisory to the county administrator, at times the human resources director. We took this issue actually in front of them and asked for input from the staff advisory. They unanimously recommended that we modify the HR policy manual to remove language from the manual or modify language that would bring them under that open meeting law posting requirement. And so the corporation counsel and the HR director went through the HR policy manual, advised us which language would need to be modified. We took that in front of the administration committee, and they unanimously recommended that we make these changes so that the staff advisory committee does not need to fall within the legal requirements for posting those meeting notices. I thought it was a long story short. I hope I made that short, but okay, short story long, thanks. Anyway, that's the history.
Is there any other discussion? Supervisor Brinkman.
Mr. Administrator, is there any other groups that are going to be affected by this?
We don't believe there are. Scott?
So the issue in the Appleton case was it authorized or created by the board? And we've taken a look at there are some committees in Health and Human Services that are statutory that we are now noticing, and we can't there's no way, quote unquote, around it because they're authorized by statute. But in terms of this kind of informal advisory body, we don't think so, no.
There was one, the investment committee, which was made up of the board chair, the administrator, the finance director, and the county treasurer, that looks at the county investments, makes recommendations. That one does fall within and we are going to be posting those notices, meeting notices. Right, Scott?
Yeah, I thought you were, but.
Yeah, well, we weren't, and we are now going to be.
Supervisor Nelson.
So really, it'll keep the investment committee of just calling a meeting at, I don't know, a couple minutes after midnight like we've seen before in certain areas to make sure it's duly posted, correct?
I don't have any meetings at midnight. Okay. It's past my
Some
bedtime.
people have done it, and constituents weren't very happy. And I'm not talking St. Croix County.
Any other discussion? I don't see any other discussion on the resolution on the handbook. There's a motion and a second on the floor, so we'll vote at this time then. And that's all yeses. Thank you. Our number 12 is resolution approving alteration to supervisor district boundaries, city of Richmond, Stanton Township. I have a motion. Supervisor Ard. Second, Supervisor Hanson. Any discussion? I don't see any discussion. We have a motion and a second on the floor for that. We'll vote at this time. We need the second. Okay, thank you. And that's all yeses. We'll move forward to our next resolution, 13, which is resolution approving alteration to supervisor district boundary, city of Richmond, town of Star Prairie. Supervisor Brinkman, motion. Second, Supervisor Hanson.
Actually, can I defer the motion to Mr.
Okay, motion for Supervisor Hanson, Supervisor Brinkman, second. Any discussion? I don't see any discussion. We have a motion and second on the floor. We'll vote. All yeses, that passes. Number 14, resolution approving alteration to supervisor district boundary, village of Somerset. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Berkey, second. Supervisor Babbitt. Don't forget to do it. So I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. As soon as we get the second up there, we will vote on it now. And that's all yeses. Thank you. That concludes that business. We have requests for future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items? Supervisor Schoberg.
you're all anxiously awaiting the report from the Water Study Quality Group. Hopefully, it'll be on the next month's agenda.
Thank you. Supervisor Brinkman.
Supervisor Schoberg and I were talking before the meeting, and we were wondering if it's possible that these, like these changes of districts where there's no vote, where there's no voting people involved, when there's an annexation, those things that take place, if it's possible just to move those to the consent agenda. I mean, I realize it's always at the end, it's always an additional 5 minutes, and nobody wants to hear my jokes anyways about them. Is that something that maybe the admin committee could talk about doing or something?
I would think
'Cause
it's
I don't have to go to that.
it would be a bylaw change because the agenda format's set up in the bylaws.
Well, the guy I talked to is on the bylaw people thingy. Oh, yeah.
And I have 2 more coming next month, so.
Okay. Any other agenda items? Not, we'll move on. The county clerk's report, correspondence, zoning.
I have no correspondence or rezonings, but those that are attending the WCA annual conference should have received the registration information via email and also on your desks. Okay?
Any questions for the county clerk? Seeing none. Announcements? Anybody have any announcements? Supervisor Ring.
Yes, I have an announcement I'd like to share with the board. Today I submitted my resignation as a member of the St. Croix County Board. It's effective September 30th. The reason I'm unable to complete my term is that I recently accepted a position with a private nonprofit organization, a very good organization, the Family Resource Center, St. Croix Valley. And the mission of that organization, if you're not aware, is to strengthen children, families, and communities by offering education, resources, and support. We focus on families with children prenatal to 5. And in this process, we serve families in 3 counties, and we have partnerships with many, many public and private agencies and organizations. So I'm resigning my board position because it's important to avoid any potential conflict of interest or appearance of a conflict of interest. And, I've had advice, and I think this is the right thing to do. So I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity the voters gave me to serve St. Croix County. I thank all the dedicated, loyal employees of the county. You see firsthand, you get a firsthand opportunity to see the work that you do. And the same to all the elected officials. We may agree or disagree, but I do appreciate the work you do all over. So I wish you all the best in your continued work to make St. Croix County a great place to live and work. And I say that, I love St. Croix County. I've had family here since the 1850s, so its future is important to me. So I will fulfill my obligations, my committee obligations, through the end of the month. So thank you, everybody. It's been a privilege. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnes, for your services you've done for the county. We appreciate it. So, any other announcements? That was a big one. Okay, seeing no other announcements, yeah, the meeting is done. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.